Colleagues, good afternoon and welcome to this live question and answer session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen Reid, the Chief Executive of the Council, and if I haven't met you as yet, I look forward to meeting you in coming weeks and months. The first thing I want to say before we get into the question and answer is that this has been a remarkable period in history. It's been a remarkable period for the Council and indeed for all of us. And I want to offer my personal thanks to each and every one of you for everything that you've done to keep all the Council services being delivered and support vulnerable people across our communities in Perth and Kinross. So a real heartfelt thanks from me. So with me this afternoon, I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, but not just introduce themselves, to actually tell you what they couldn't have done without during the pandemic. So if I can perhaps invite Barbara Renton first. Barbara?
Hi, thank you, Karen. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Barbara Renton. I'm Executive Director of Housing and Environment, and I'm delighted to join this Q&A session this afternoon. So I think that there are many things that probably wouldn't, couldn't have worked without the walks in the evening, just to get some fresh air when we were dealing with particularly difficult situations. But to be honest, the thing that none of us could have worked without is our IT colleagues. And I would just like to say a big thank you to them. This meeting wouldn't be taking place without their support. The fact that we moved from almost a standing start in terms of being able to work remotely to where we are now, again, couldn't have been done without our IT colleagues. So thanks to them again.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'll now turn to Sheena, please.
Thank you, Karen, and hello everybody. My name is Sheena Devlin, Executive Director of Education and Children's Services here in Perth and Kinross, and I'm really pleased to be engaging with you all in this way too. There's nothing worse than going second, is there? Because the person in front of you might often just be stealing the very thing that you would have said, and what Barbara has said was going to be my, if you like, most serious thing that I could not have coped without, and has certainly got me through, and it's the quality of the hardware, absolutely, and undoubtedly the quality of the human resource within our IT department, who have enabled so many of us who have required to work swiftly, at pace, using digital technology in the way we have. It's just been tremendous, and other things keep me going. The camaraderie of colleagues, even at a distance, and the opportunity to come together and to still find occasions to laugh at some of the things that have happened throughout this process, particularly some of the things that happened during some of the Teams meetings, and I'm sure everybody's got their stories to tell around that, so thank you.
Thank you, Sheena, and I'll now come to Karen Donaldson, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Karen Donaldson, and since April of this year I've fulfilled the role of Interim Chief Operating Officer within the Council. So what have I not been able to work without during the outbreak? Well, there's two things I would like to say. First of all, it's the support of colleagues. Taking on a new role can be difficult in the best of times, but when everybody's working from home and during an outbreak, I have certainly benefited from the support of colleagues across the Council, within Corporate and Democratic Services, and also within the Executive Officer team. So I think that is testament to the people that we have in our organisation who are very supportive of each other. So I'm very grateful for that. And the other thing I would say that I've really been glad of having over the last 5 months is access to my garden. That has been my source of inspiration and a place to chill out, especially in those early weeks when we weren't travelling about very much at all. So I've certainly benefited from being able to nurture and tend my garden. Sheena, you said there's nothing worse than going second. Well, perhaps it's going last, as I have done this morning, because I too would like to echo my appreciation and thanks to colleagues within IT and other services who have been absolutely pivotal in helping us work from home. And that includes committee services, human resources staff who've looked at developing arrangements. We've got a wellbeing officer, wellbeing champion. There are so many people who have been instrumental in actually facilitating us working from home. And I think that is true testament to the character and the strength of our people in Perth and Kinross Council. So a heartfelt thanks from me to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And supporting us this afternoon, it would be remiss of me not to ask the team supporting us this afternoon to do this event, just to say a very quick hello. So if I can call on Ruth.
Hello everybody, I'm Ruth, the Corporate Communications Manager, and I will be moderating your questions today.
Thank you, Ruth. And Chris?
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Chris Wright. I'm helping to facilitate what we're using this afternoon, which is Microsoft Teams, and hopefully making sure everything runs smoothly this afternoon.
Excellent. And I think there are probably a couple of more people. Andy, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here, Karen. Thanks. I'm having a bit of problems with my IT here, actually. I'm just making sure everything runs smoothly, and every day is a school day, so we're learning new things as we go along here, just to make sure we can further support in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. And of course, this is the first time we've done anything like this, so please bear with us, colleagues. And I think Bobby is the other person who's here this afternoon.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm just the same as Andy, just here helping to support Karen and Sheena and anybody else that's on the call if they've got any technical issues just in the background.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. So, colleagues, as everyone has said this afternoon, we couldn't have got through the last 5 months without each and every one of you. And it's really difficult to name every single service and every single person. But as I said in my introduction, a huge heartfelt thanks. We have undoubtedly gone the extra mile day in, day out to make sure that the Council delivers its services, and indeed we support people in our local communities. But actually this afternoon's about what can we do to support you more in your role and within the Council. So if you're listening and you've got questions for us, feel free to post them. We've had a couple of people send in some questions already, so I'm going to turn to those. I'll read them out and then I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to respond. So the first question is that the Council has about 60 odd spaces in the level 7 multi-storey car park in Canule Street, and one of our colleagues is suggesting that only 4 cars this morning were parked up there. Could people who are accessing Pooler House have access to these spaces on a temporary basis, plus our parking attendants who are covering many roles at this moment in time? So this is from Jim Granger in Parking Operations, and I am going to ask Barbara Renton to respond to that, please, Barbara.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and thanks, Jim, for your question. And can I also convey my thanks to the very hard work that the parking attendants have done over the response period. I think that, you know, sort of if you were to do a straw poll of visitors or citizens of Perth and Kinross, then, you know, sort of some days the parking attendants might not be very high up on people's favourite list, which is really, really not fair. I know almost all of you, and you're a great team, you do a great job, and you have really, really risen to the occasion. I know that Lisa Simpson calls you our welfare heroes because that's what you've done. You've been there, you know, sort of you've delivered food parcels, you've organised things. Some of you have actually even been into shops to say and to negotiate excess food coming to our food store and all that kind of thing. So you have done a remarkable job. And I would be grateful, Jim, if you could pass that on, and any of the parking attendants who are watching, you know, sort of well done, and thank you for that. It's something I have to say in terms of your question that I hadn't actually thought about, but I think, you know, sort of, so I am going to go away and speak to Hunter Hope, who, you know, sort of is the controlling mind in terms of car parking spaces. And so while I can't give you an answer straight off, you know, sort of, and as we move more into people returning in a phased basis to Pooler House, on the basis of either the teams, you know, sort of, and the service manager has said, actually, we need the team to be, or some of the teams to be returning, and also the people who've requested it on a personal basis to come. So we don't know how many people are coming back and how many of those have already got a car parking space allocated. But I'll get Hunter to have a look at that and have a look at your suggestion, and we'll come back to you. Thank you.
That's great, Barbara, thank you. I am going to move on to another question, and please don't be shy, colleagues, please post a question to us, but I will go to another question. One of our colleagues is asking, how do you think we can counter the sometimes negative view of the council through the Perth and Kinross offer? And I'm not necessarily going to turn to any one colleague in particular. I'm going to offer that up because I think we've all got some thoughts about that. So who would like to go first? Oh. Okay, Sheena, are you coming in?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I just didn't want to rush in there and cut across anybody else. This is something that, oh, you know, depending on what team you work in, what service you work in, I'm sure this is something that all of us have given lots of thought to over a long period of time, because it can sometimes feel that there's very rarely positive stories that reflect the totality of the fabulous work that actually goes on the length and breadth of Perth and Kinross. And so there's probably something I think we all need to consider. I don't think there's a silver bullet here. I don't think there's one simple solution, but there is a bit maybe about, well, what is it that we think is important to get out and about into the public domain, and what are the different routes by which we could do that? We know, and Ruth will be able to come in with more hard evidence around this, but we know that readership of newspapers is decreasing locally and nationally. We know that readership through things like social media is on the up. We know that people more frequently tune into podcasts and blogs. So I guess there's a question for all of us in our teams and in our services about, are we actually using the right means to get the right stories out at the right time to the sort of people that we want to get our stories out and about to? So if I just give a wee example, we put a very, very quick and dirty poll out on social media as we were beginning to plan for the return to schools. And Ruth, I think I'm right in saying that there was probably something like 12,000 responses now, or impressions. So it could be likes, retweets, comments, all of that kind of thing, in the space of something like 40 hours. So actually we do have the means at our fingertips to be doing the communication. I think we just need to think about how do we do that differently. So what are the stories we want known? What are the means that we are going to get them out and about there? And what's our role in making sure that we enable that to happen? Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Sheena. Karen, did you want to come in?
Yes, Karen. I've been fortunate to take part in some of the ward meetings where we've been engaging with representatives of different community organisations, community council members, elected members. And one of the things I would say is that I've been struck by the positivity of those who've been participating. They've been very positive about the response and the support from PKC colleagues across the piece during lockdown. And where there has been anything negative, I would say it's actually been constructive feedback. So in terms of what can we do to counter the negative, I think that we have to listen not to react to any feedback that we get. Feedback is neither good nor bad. I think we have to consider it carefully and respond to it. And not be defensive. I think it's important to listen. People are describing their experiences, and it's for us to listen very closely to that and to try and triangulate that information and take action where appropriate. So I think that the Perth and Kinross offer and the communication and engagement with communities will be an excellent way for giving those who maybe find the council hard to reach the opportunity to give their views and opinions, and it's our responsibility to listen carefully to that and respond appropriately.
Thank you, Karen. And Barbara, can I come to you?
No, thank you. I agree with sort of everything that Sheena and Karen have said. What the offer really is, and what we've discussed at length in various meetings that we've had, sort of with our service managers and across the council and with our elected members, is that what actually we have seen over the last 5 months is the Perth and Kinross offer in practice. And the council report, sort of had an appendix at the back of that actually showed, sort of we did, you did, sort of with our communities in response. And that's a very, very strong piece of work and a very strong piece of evidence that shows that the offer does, sort of mean a lot to not just internally, but to our communities. And we need to build on that. We need to carry on building on that. And the other thing that I think that would make a difference is using those community stories, sort of, and making the stories about the communities, and then the subset of that is what the council did to support all of that, rather than the council did this. Oh, and by the way, we did some work with the community. So turning that whole narrative around, that it is, sort of, because the press are much less likely to, sort of, be more negative about our communities than they are about the council. So if we've got those stories, and often it's you that have those stories, but you're really, really shy in telling us as well, sort of some of the work that we found out about really just by chance some days, and you're just getting on with it, sort of. And when you say, oh, why didn't you make more of a fuss of that? A lot of the answer is, certainly from my services, oh, but that's just our job. We were just getting on with things, sort of. And I think that you need to recognise that actually the job that you're doing in many, many occasions is the offer in practice as well, and allowing us and coming to us and saying, well, by the way, and it's not boasting, it's not, sort of, and it's maybe an un-Scottish, un-council thing to do, but, sort of, to celebrate that and to turn a little bit of that negative is for you to then say, actually, we've got really, really good stories to tell that demonstrate what the offer is about and how communities and us have worked together to make a big difference in that area as well. So.
Okay, thank you, Sheena, Karen and Barbara. So just to summarise, we need to be clearer about our key messages. As Sheena said, we need to use social media. Karen's highlighted the importance of the ward meetings and the fact that we listen, we're not defensive when we get feedback, and we try to do things differently. We have got you said, we did, or we are doing in terms of feedback, but we do need to promote community stories. And indeed, what we have seen over the last 5 months is undoubtedly the Perth and Kinross offer in action and real empowerment across communities. And indeed, I hope for many of you watching this afternoon. And I guess the final thing from me is that people will begin to think that things are changing in the council when they have a different experience themselves. So being able to support you to think yes, and indeed focus on how can we help you, people will have a very different experience. So really keen to hear from you about what more we could do to enable you to think yes and indeed achieve that. So thank you to the colleague who raised that question. I'm going to go to another question now, and one of our colleagues is asking, during lockdown, many people re-engaged with the natural environment, which has undoubtedly creeped back into all our conscious thoughts, and indeed it's reduced travel and pollution. So having embraced this, our colleague is saying that they decided the time was right to move to an electric vehicle. However, the council scheme with Tusker was suspended on the 31st of March and would appear to continue to be unavailable. So given our commitment to tackling the emergency, the climate emergency, our colleagues asking effectively when will the scheme be available and when can they order their brand new car? So Karen, I think I'm going to come to you for that one, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to answer Alan's question. Just in case anybody didn't realise, the Tusker car scheme is administered by our payroll colleagues. And perhaps you will be relieved to hear that they did prioritise their efforts to make sure that all staff were paid accurately on time, right from the start of the outbreak. And they did this through by working from home, which was a huge change in terms of setting them up at home to do all the processing and the checks that they have to do to maintain the high standards of payroll. And for that reason, we looked at areas of work that we could actually suspend and pause to allow them to focus on the most critical aspects of their role. Now, our payroll colleagues continue to work from home and are extremely busy with a lot of the new starts and changes that we've had to support the return of schools who have just gone back this year. So this is annually the time of year where there's a significant intake of teachers and probationary teachers and a number of changes to other school staff. And their efforts have been focused on that. So at this point in time, they have not returned to normal work. And I am very keen that we do actually look at bringing back the Tusker scheme to be available for staff, because it very much supports the Council's commitment to action for climate change as well. So what I would say, Alan, is that my best estimate at the moment, having had a quick chat with colleagues in HR, is that the scheme will be relaunched again in October. And that's subject to, of course, us continuing to make progress, and there's nothing else that happens in the intervening period that detracts from the progress that the team's making. So we'd love to get it back. It's all been a question of priorities, but we'll be keen to get that back and available for staff as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Karen and Alan. When you do get your new electric vehicle, there's many people very interested in terms of how it works and what your experience has been, so feel free to let us know, and I wish you many, many happy miles of driving in your electric car. So thank you for that. Colleagues, I'm going to move on to a question around what will be the biggest changes to the way that we work? And if you don't mind, I'll maybe kick off and then I'll maybe offer it up to you if you want to contribute. So I think what COVID has shown us is that firstly, and I want to come to have some discussion this afternoon about well-being and the way we do things around here, but certainly firstly, I think what COVID has taught us is that by working with our communities in a way where we focus on what our communities need, and those needs are very different across the whole in Perth and Kinross. So I know that what's needed in Pitlochry is very different from what might be needed in Blair Athol. But that true focus on community needs really makes a difference, and working together to actually address those needs is uppermost in our minds. And I think that's going to be one of the key changes in terms of how we do things. So quite often we deliver services in a way that is about service delivery. I think in the future, in the not too distant future, we'll begin to look at how do we ensure that we are much more focused on outcomes, and we actually deliver services, bringing people and teams together, out with directorate and team functions, but to actually deliver on outcomes. And maybe if I explain myself just a little bit more clearly, I think that if in for example, the Rattray area, we know that some of the challenges for people living in that area are around alcohol and drugs. Then we've got to focus on how we best support them to address the issues around alcohol and drugs. But actually in Crieff, it might be about older people wanting to live well in their own home. And I think that's what we've got to focus in on, is how do we put teams together to deliver in those areas. But I think technology is also going to play a massive part, and we've seen that over the last 5 months in terms of the way that we meet. I don't think that we'll all be back in the office on a full-time basis unless it's absolutely essential for our roles, and I think we might do a couple of days at home and a couple of days in the office, and we'll use technology to meet as we're doing at the moment. I think technology will play a massive part, both in terms of education and learning, and Sheena may wish to say something about that in terms of the preparations that have been going on in our schools, but equally so in health and social care and the way that we are delivering services right now. I think technology is going to play an even bigger role. One of the successes, although I appreciate some people have not had a good experience, is around NHS Near Me and the online appointments with GPs. So I think that will be set to continue. I also think in terms of smart cities that we're going to see technology really supporting us to do things differently across the local area in terms of street lighting, charging, all of those different things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And finally, I think the drive towards net zero is going to change all our behaviours, and we're all much more focused on the environment, the natural environment. Karen mentioned enjoying our garden. I think over recent times we've become much more aware of the seasons and indeed being outdoors and how it's good for all our mental health and well-being. So I think there's going to be a real shift in terms of a focus on net zero, reducing our carbon footprint and indeed using technology. So that, alongside multidisciplinary teams, will undoubtedly be the way forward, and a mixed and blended approach to working, I think. But happy to open that up for any colleagues. Sheena, I don't know if you want to say anything about schools and learning and the fantastic job that our teachers have done over recent months too.
Thanks, Karen. I guess my short answer to this would be, rather than what do you think the changes, the biggest changes are that we'll see, I think we've seen some of them and we're seeing them just now, and what we need to do is make sure we hold on to them, refine them further and continue to use them widely as appropriate and not lose them. Technology is obviously a big one, and you heard right at the beginning, we were all saying, well, we could not, as a senior management team in the council, we could not have done the work that we've done were it not for the technology that enabled us to do that. And actually what this has done, the pandemic, from time to time you will hear me saying God bless the pandemic in terms of what it's brought about for us, and how it's accelerated some changes that were perhaps in train and being discussed. One of those is about, you know, using digital literacies, digital technologies to support learning in different ways. And we saw across all of our schools that were at different states of readiness for that back in March the 23rd. And my goodness me, the learning curve for everybody has been significant, steeper for some than for others, but there is nobody that shied away from that challenge. So if we think about the fact that 17th of August today, that marks full-time return for all children and young people who are able to return, whose health permits that, to schools. What we're not going to say is that there will never be approaches to blended learning used, because blended learning in itself is something that's been around for a long time, particularly in FE and ITCHE, and we are looking at how we can use that across what we call our senior phase, S4, 5 and 6, to support a breadth of curriculum offered that perhaps hasn't been able to be offered before, and how we can also use digital technologies to support what we call our Perth City campus. So just now we've had, over the past 6-7 years, a situation where youngsters in their senior years can go between different schools to ensure a breadth and depth of choice in the curriculum. And rather than have them actually physically move between schools, we'll be using technology to support that. And one of the things I'm really keen to pursue is, how do we have hybrid meetings? So how do we have some people who are able to be in a particular building with all appropriate risk assessments and mitigations in place, fully connected with those who will be coming in through a platform such as Teams. And I'm really keen to see how we can continue to work with our IT colleagues. And I know that Chris from IT put a thing out on Twitter from the digital skills team recently, looking for some schools to sign up to be running parent evenings from digital platforms. And actually one of the things I've done with colleagues in education is we've run 2 meetings for the chairs of our parent councils by Teams, and had in excess of 55 people attend those meetings and be able to run those successfully. So we'll not be going back to everybody from all the airs and parts of Perth and Kinross coming into a meeting in North Inch Community Campus. We'll be looking to run that as a hybrid meeting in future. So that's just touching the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the changes, but with a particular focus on digital. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Sheena. And Karen, I'm going to turn to you because I'm going to just add another question because it's really quite relevant. And Ruth Turner is asking, we have been taking advantage of IT and technology and have started to use temporary platforms which allow us the ability to access and share information more easily across the organisation. And I appreciate Sheena's touched a wee bit on that too. Will there be scope in going forward to look at this in more depth and to obtain or develop platforms to better support the organisation? And of course, Ruth's main area is health and safety and making sure that we are all doing as we need to do to keep each other safe and well. But she's sure that other areas would welcome that too. So Karen, can I just ask you just to respond in light of the 2 questions now?
Sure, no problem. I think the simple answer is, will we be doing more of it? The answer to that is a definite yes. And before lockdown, we had started a programme of work looking at how we make much better use of data and analytics within the organisation, and that includes looking at the architecture and the hardware that we have within the organisation to support that. So there have been some significant advances made during lockdown in terms of how we share and access information, not only across council services but with our partners as well. And there's been huge learning in that that we want to build on. So I think digital is the way forward. We have had a glimpse of a roadmap about what we would like to do, and we do hope to look at investing and developing that roadmap, because it is really important that we have much more effective and efficient ways of accessing and sharing information that gives us rich insight into the information that we already hold and make better use of that. So I think that's an area that I think we would all be very, very keen to see what further investment we are able to make to get some pace around that area.
Karen, thank you. And as part of that, just to confirm that we will be asking elected members to make a significant investment in the capital infrastructure of the organisation in terms of IT and digital to enable us to build on the many successes to date. So I'm just going to finally come to Barbara to say, Barbara, is there anything you wish to add to this, or can I move forward with another question?
I'm going to be really short, Karen. I think that the biggest change that I would like to see is about greater staff empowerment and think yes. And you've already touched on that, but I think we've demonstrated it. Service managers, team leaders, their teams, you know, sort of during COVID, we've seen significant service change and people just getting on and doing it without feeling the need to come and ask, you know, sort of for approval for that. So that's what I think will be the biggest change.
Yeah, I agree with that, Barbara. I think that is something that we are very, very keen to support, and if there are things that are getting in the way of that, I think we want to know about how we can help. So I'm going to turn to another question, and Sheena, I think this is probably one for you around how best to support a young adult with mental health issues caused by the sudden ending of routines such as school and sport, exams and relationship with friends, and having explored a number of different options. Alan is saying that it seems to be quite uncoordinated and frustrating support path for young people who are affected by the consequences of COVID-19. I just wondered if you can maybe just share some of the plans that are in place and indeed the support that's available for young people and their families and carers. And could you maybe just touch upon whether there's a potential for some targeted social prescribing once venues such as gyms and swimming, etc. open up? So I'll just hand over to you, Sheena. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking through your question, Alan, and I guess if you've had that experience, then that's something we would want to hear more about to see what else and additionally we might be able to do. One of the things that actually began early doors during the lockdown was our educational psychology service team were offering daily support sessions which could be done with a telephone call. In some occasions, once some of the lockdown restrictions were easing, it could be an actual meeting, and if not, then using again a platform like this. So we've been very aware that the whole experience of, you know, de facto civil liberties being restricted, normal points of social contact, all of these things being removed and being done so abruptly will have been pretty challenging for many people. And so through schools, through our social care officers, through Wellbank, through Woodlea, through senior management teams, our educational psychology service, and with a number of our partners in PAS, Perth Autism Support, Place to Be, all of these organisations, we have been working very hard to try and make sure that those who are in most need of our support are actually able to get that. So I would be concerned if you feel that that's been a bit uncoordinated and disjointed. So as I say, happy to pick up with that. One of the things that we do know helps support people is for them to be able to choose what it is that they would like to do, the kind of support, and through self-directed support, some of that will have been adversely affected. And we are very keen to get back to being able to ensure that those who were in receipt of self-directed support are able to have that re-established. And absolutely, the social prescribing that you described there is something that we've been thinking about. You know, it's not just about a counselling session. We know that sometimes that can have limited impact if that's not actually the best kind of support for whoever that happens to be targeted at. But sometimes it's just about backing amongst some of the people that you know and that you trust, that you've got good, strong, supportive relationships with. And somebody mentioned earlier about people reconnecting with outdoors. That is something that I know for me provided great support, great solace at times, was just to be outside, whether that was feeling the sunshine on your face or the rain on the hood of your jacket, but actually just being outside, getting some exercise. It needn't be complicated, it needn't be complex, it needn't involve lots of other people sorting that out for you, but absolutely, yeah, that's something that we will want to look at. So Alan, you could maybe contact me following on from this just to let me know what exactly your experience has been and how we might be able to better support that. Thank you.
Sheena, thank you. That's really helpful. Sorry, I'm getting a wee bit of feedback there. I think I'll maybe move on, Sheena, just because you did a really nice segue there into well-being. And you know, someone's asked how we're all looking after our well-being, and there's maybe some opportunity there just to share what's worked for us. And Sheena, you just touched upon being outside and feeling the sun on your face. I would want colleagues listening to be aware of the Health and Wellbeing Conference that we're going to have on the 4th of September. So I just draw your attention to that. But actually, looking after ourselves, you know, sometimes when we're in busy jobs like we all are, we don't pay enough attention to looking after ourselves as individuals. And you can only give to others and give to your job if you look after your own health and well-being. So I'll maybe offer you up a couple of things, and those of you who listened to Barbara and I in the lockdown lounge recently will know that I've been attempting to run every other day, and I say run, but many of you, if you saw me, you would realise it was just a slow shuffle along the road. So you're just trying to get out and doing a wee bit of exercise. But a couple other things that are really important to me. I have two really adorable grandsons, Harry and Rory, who are 2.5 and just over 1.5. So just being able to see them again was just momentous for me, and being able to spend time with them. So that was really lovely. And finally, as some people will know, I have a dog who features in meetings on occasion, or certainly his barking does. So he's got quite a reputation that goes before him now. But yeah, just getting out with the dog and being outside, as Sheena's already said. But Sheena, I don't know if you want to add any more to your own well-being, how you keep well during this really difficult time.
Yeah, I in fact 6 years ago I joined an outdoor fitness camp on North Inch, and it's the only exercise that I have stuck with ever in my life. I've had numerous gym memberships and all the rest of it, and they've all gone by the by. And of course, even that, albeit outdoors exercise, stopped during lockdown, and as yet we've not had permission to start up again. However, we have been able to continue using Zoom and using Messenger video. So there'll be people all over Perth and Kinross and further afield out in their gardens looking at the little screen on their phone or their iPad, and I've been participating still in outdoor fitness camp in all weathers, so that's been good. I also do Pilates and sometimes yoga, and again that's transferred from the studio to Zoom, so that's been great. And just lots of walking. Barbara mentioned that earlier. Certainly when, you know, our state allowed exercise was restricted to one sojourn out a day, getting out and walking or going for a shuffle, because I don't run either, but I do sometimes up the pace ever so slightly, but it couldn't constitute anything faster than a shuffle, and so been doing a bit of that. So those are the things in terms of physical well-being. Music's a big thing for me, and I have to say the lockdown lounge on a Friday has just been I describe it as an oasis in often a week of what can seem like madness, and coming together. And I know Mary's tuning into this just now, and Mary, you tune into the lockdown as well. It's just listening to great music, but what it's done for me as well is brought together people from all parts of the council that I certainly wouldn't ordinarily be in regular contact with, and some of the banter in the chat is just as good for you actually as listening to some of the great tunes that are played, and it's one of the things that I hope will continue after we see a further easing of lockdown restrictions. Thanks, Karen, for that opportunity.
Thanks, Sheena. And Barbara, can I come to you, please?
Yes, I mean, I have described, you know, sort of at length before, you know, sort of our wanderings around the village, you know, sort of, and now that we've been able to go a wee bit further afield, our wanderings around various other places along the Carse and, you know, sort of by the seaside, particularly just round about Broughty Ferry and stuff like that. But for me, actually, just seeing the power of nature, you know, sort of we've been wandering so long that, you know, sort of, the fields round about our house have gone from being earth to, you know, sort of almost ready to cut, in terms of the barley or the oats or the wheat or whatever it is, because neither of us are very sure what it is, but it's been quite impressive. So seeing nature actually in action, you know, sort of one of the walks, we go along a little village street, and, you know, sort of one lady there, you know, sort of the planting that she's done, you know, sort of that's very seasonal. And this, over the last fortnight, it's been sunflowers, you know, sort of, and it just is, it actually lifts your heart when you see it, you know, sort of, so, and it's just little things like that. And it's family and friends, both, you know, sort of work colleagues and out with work, that just that wee bit of banter some days, you know, sort of, and I think, and with every relationship and all of our relationships, some days you have good days and other days aren't quite so good, but there's always somebody there just to go, oh, get over yourself. you know, sort of, and, you know, sort of really put you back in your life back into perspective. And certainly within the Renton household, there's been no allowances for complaining, because we are dead lucky. We've always been, you know, sort of got space both inside and outside, and we get on as well, which has made a huge difference. I have to say, if we didn't get on most of the time, then I think that would have been, and I know that it's not been like that for everybody. So it's just, you know, sort of, it's building on what we've done, but genuinely for me, being out and about, and just seeing the way that the tea can change, you know, sort of, and it's a guessing game now whether the tide's going to be in or out, and we've no idea how that works. Well, we know how it works, but the sort of, but when it works is just beyond us, you know, sort of. But seeing the tea actually with no water in it on a fairly regular basis, and the might of the power behind that as well, you know, sort of, is certainly, it puts a lot of things into perspective for me as well.
Thanks, Barbara. And Karen, you mentioned about your garden earlier, and I might just hand over to you about, you know, how you've looked after your own well-being over the last 5 months.
Okay, I think the garden has played an important part in that. I can remember right in the early weeks where, probably like most people with gardens, there was a frenzy of activity about painting fences and varnishing deckings, etc., and working out how you can get to your nearest DIY store and do your customer collections, which was all a great learning experience, and quite funny now when you think back to it all, because on our strolls round about our area, you would be able to watch those who were obviously at home and spending time in their garden and doing their fences, etc. And then you might come across somewhere that was a little less well kept, and you thought, well, there's clearly people who are working around the clock, and maybe don't have the opportunity to spend that time in their gardens. I think the other thing for me has been enjoying cooking and baking. So there's some insight into some of my hobbies and interests. I really like trying new recipes and experimenting. Don't really like following the measurements exactly. I'm much more a little bit of this, and I don't have this item on the list, I'll try something else. So that's how I've been channeling my creativity and experimenting on the rest of the family. And they're all still alive, I'll add that. So alive.
Reassured the laugh of it.
No garden.
So Karen, it's only taken us 5 months to realise that you've been doing all this baking and so on, and we've not even been able to see it virtually. So we'll look forward to tasting it at some point in the future. But on a more serious point, we do know that a few colleagues have really found it challenging to be working from home and, you know, perhaps balancing your family life and looking after children and doing their job. And, you know, I'm a great advocate actually of people being able to work and balance their family and work if their job allows it, whenever it suits them to do that. But, you know, for some people, isolation is a big issue. You know, if you're just talking to a screen all day and you know, you're not able to get out and about, you're not able to meet your friends and family members. So, you know, just some thoughts about what support we can give to individuals who are experiencing real challenges around isolation. So Karen, maybe just ask for your reflections on that, please.
I think we became aware quite early on that there were those who were thriving and those who were actually not coping particularly well, and therefore quite early on we, as an executive officer team, we were delighted to be able to appoint Gillian Reeves as our wellbeing champion. And Gillian, working with colleagues within corporate OD and HR, they've pulled together a whole raft of information that's been made available on the staff website, a very quickly created website that staff could access all the same materials that they could through Eric, but to do so from home. So we've now obviously have an opportunity for staff with particular wellbeing requirements to come back into the office either on a full-time or a part-time basis. But one of the things that we've also been saying is that as well as looking after themselves, peer support is also really important. So, you know, we can all look out for our colleagues by offering that friendly ear, whether it's by phone or Teams, or even meeting up and going for a socially distant walk. So there's lots of other ways that we can actually provide that support to our peers. And managers clearly play an important role as well, remembering that we can deal with individuals on a one-to-one basis and not always within a team setting, and making time just to get to know people and to giving people space and the opportunity to talk about what's worrying them is really important as well. So I think we've heard lots of examples of teams just making time for a bit of coffee and a chat, or tea and a bun, or whatever it happens to be. And I think just creating different spaces for people to chat, not necessarily about business matters, but just what's happening and what might be worrying them, are important ways for staff to feel less socially isolated and more connected to their peers, to their manager, and to the organisation that they work for.
Karen, I wonder, could I just come in with a couple of things there, because it's you know, this has been something that's been uppermost in all of our minds, and what we've seen with our staff, we've seen with our children and young people, and we've seen with our families as well. And there's been many people who have, you know, relished and flourished actually in with the opportunities that's been presented to them, and there's others that have really struggled with different aspects of it. Some of that's from an isolatory point of view. Some of that's about the pressures for some households in terms of having children at home who you're trying to support with their home learning and also undertake work. And certainly for some colleagues who were finding the isolation part of working from home difficult, actually, the pandemic gave us some really good natural opportunities to get them involved in some of the volunteering work that they might not have ordinarily been able to do. And so certainly in my service, I know there's been quite a few folk who've been doing some voluntary work, you know, with our food parcel work and the communities teams and all the rest of it, and they've really enjoyed that opportunity. For some of that, I'm always loath to say face-to-face, because you've got to caveat that it's not face-to-face as it would have been ordinarily. But we can never underestimate the importance of that social interaction for people and for their well-being. And so as we are thinking about, you know, what have been the benefits that we've seen here, it's how do we balance that against some of the disbenefits and the things that have not gone so well for people as well, and we've got to take that into account. But we've certainly seen a number of families for whom we had potentially some significant concerns who've been tremendously resilient throughout all of this, and of course lots of people whose family and personal circumstances changed considerably, whether that was because, you know, jobs were lost or there was bereavement or other loss as well, and we have been mindful to try and provide the best kind of support for all of them as well. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Sheena. Colleagues, I'm going to move on. There's one other question around meeting up in community groups that I want to move to, and then I'd like to address a couple of questions, specific practical questions about structures, etc., before we close it in the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So Heather Shields is asking, community groups would like to get back to supporting people with their well-being, such as mental health drop-in or dementia groups. And with the Scottish Government guidelines at a maximum of 3 households and up to 8 people indoors, that would mean quite a restriction for a community group, only 3 people including the volunteer. And are there any guidelines from Perth and Kinross Council on how a community group can work as an essential service to support people in small groups? And so, for example, a maximum of 6 people adhering to social distancing. My suggestion to that, Heather, is that we will ask our communities team to work and to draw up some guidance for volunteering to make sure that it's safe, and indeed that we can maximise the amount of support that we can give. I know the Health and Social Care Partnership are also looking at this, so I think working together we'll draw up something with community groups, and I'll ask Barbara please to take that task on and open it up to colleagues if there's anything else you want to add to that response, colleagues.
No, and I think that we just used to they'll have to think about how we use IT to be able to do that, you know, sort of, and I know that a lot of community groups are really, you know, sort of physically on the ground, you know, sort of area-based initiative work, for example, you know, sort of it is, you know, sort of about meeting, deciding what the community want to take forward with some support from the council, but we will have a look at that, being mindful obviously of the Scottish Government route map and their guidance as well, so which needs to be at the core of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you, Barbara, and Heather, thank you for that, because it's really important that we support volunteers and community groups in terms of the tremendous work that they're doing out in the local community. I'm going to move now just to a couple of practical questions. One of the questions that really struck me is, will there be redundancies as a result of COVID and the ongoing financial situation? So I'd like to maybe just address that by saying that we are, as an executive, acutely aware of the impact that COVID has had on our local economy, and very much of the view that wherever we can minimise and mitigate any potential job loss, we absolutely have to do that. And I think it would be fair to say that we're working incredibly hard to look at a whole host of alternative solutions to the Council's financial challenges, and one of those is certainly not redundancy at this moment in time. So we are aware that our unemployment rate's gone from 2 to 5% across the local area since lockdown. That was just released last week, and we've seen a 148% increase in our unemployment figures. So the last thing we want to do is compound that by the council entering into redundancy. So please be assured that we will do everything we possibly can to avoid that situation. And that probably leads to a couple of questions around structure, and many of you will know that Jim Valentine recently retired, and Keith McNamara is joining Tayside Contracts as the new managing director. And whilst we're delighted for both Jim and Keith, it leaves us with some challenges in terms of the structure and how we actually seize this as an opportunity to restructure the executive team in a way that's going to support some of the things we've shared with you this afternoon in terms of new ways of working, and indeed the Perth and Kinross offer and our ambitions for the future. But at this early stage, we don't have the detail of that, so I'm unable to answer the question whether or not we're going to appoint a new deputy director to replace Keith. That's something that we will be working on in terms of the structure in coming weeks, and we'll be able to let colleagues know and indeed consult with people where appropriate in time to come. And there's also a question around the previous reorganisation. I'm not quite sure if that was prior to my joining, because we've not reorganised since I joined the council, but I'll defer to Barbara and Sheena and Karen as they may know more than me. But a question from someone who is asking how were staff consulted before the last reorganisation, what were their views and how were these views taken into account? And I really want us to, as colleagues know, be very open and transparent in terms of the feedback that colleagues give us and how we respond to that, and indeed if and when we act on that and we feed back to people what we're actually going to do. So colleagues, I'll open it up. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that, but Karen, I imagine you will probably know some of that.
I'm trying to think exactly what may have, what type of reorganisation somebody may have been thinking about, because there are different types of restructure and reorganisation that happen across the organisation and for a variety of reasons, and some of that can be within service, some of that can be moving functions between service. Others have been across the organisation looking at the management structure, for example. So without knowing specifics, what I would say is that we have always taken an approach of engaging and consulting with both staff and trade unions to ensure that people that are familiar with the work and understand the activity are actually able to give their opinions and their insight. And as you would imagine, sometimes it's not possible to take everything into account when decisions have to be made. And therefore we would always aspire to provide feedback on why something is taken forward or why something is not. On the whole, we're normally able to find a way forward that delivers the outcomes that we're looking for, and everybody can buy into. But sometimes that's just not possible, and that's just one of the issues in working in a large, diverse organisation that we have. So perhaps rather than looking back, it's maybe more appropriate to look forward and just to give that that undertaking that you mentioned, and that is to be to aspire to be open and transparent in all that we do, to take staff's views on board, to see what we're able to take account of and what we're not, and be very clear on what it is we're trying to achieve in future and in any future restructure.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So I'm very conscious that time has flown by this afternoon, and I really appreciate all the questions that have been put forward. We would really love to do this again, so if colleagues of you would find this really helpful, please do let us know. There are some questions that we haven't unfortunately been able to get round to, so we will answer those directly. But in the meantime, what I would say to people who are looking to become more involved in some of the exciting opportunities that we have coming along around the Perth and Kinross offer is have a chat with your team leader or your manager. This is really important that we've got people from across the organisation helping us shape what the future is going to look like. So thank you for your participation this afternoon, and indeed if you're listening to the session once it's posted up, thank you for your time, and indeed please do keep in touch with us, let us know what your thoughts are, and if you'd like another session like this, we'd be delighted to participate. And finally, again, as I started off, thank you so much for all that you're doing for people across Perth and Kinross. We really do appreciate it, and stay safe and well. Thank you.